Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Holosun Optics 509 miniature red dot sight. Over the past few years, but definitely more recently, noticeably with outside of its core group of shooters, Holosun has begun to really insulate themselves and kind of situate themselves as a very strong competitor in the hard use, duty use optic category, especially for handguns. If you're familiar, I did a review on their 507 and then their 508, and Holosun sent out this 509 prior to release to get my final opinions on it and see if I thought that there could be any ways that they could improve upon the design or make these final last-minute finesse changes. One thing you'll notice immediately about the 509 is it is a enclosed emitter, which is a feature that some people want, a lot of people actually want, in their handgun optics, because some of the concerns that we have with handgun optics comes with that objective or that ocular lens becoming fogged or obscured based in the environment, based in use, but it's still got to be durable and it's still got to have a reasonable footprint. Now the shape is definitely something that comes up, but when you think about it, if you're going to have an enclosed optic, especially one that will fit on a handgun, you're going to pretty much marrying yourself to one of two shapes: round, square, or some combination thereof. So aesthetically, I don't care. As long as it's going to provide a reasonable footprint, it's not needlessly large, needlessly heavy, and it's got reasonable, durable features, the ultimate shape is not a real big concern of mine. Now the 509, the one that I got, came with an MOS specific plate, but already aftermarket Glock and other, I should say, handgun manufacturers are coming up with their own plate solutions. One of the problems that we run into from a design aspect with enclosed emitters is you can't really have two screws that go straight down, so it does limit your mounting options to try to use a footprint that already exists. So they couldn't use an existing like RMR or Romeo or Delta Point footprint. They had to create a secondary interface, in this case being a plate, thankfully made of steel, for this MOS slide that I have. So I reviewed it on a Glock 17. It's a Gen 4 with a Gen 4 MOS slide. I've never been a big fan of the MOS, not because the everything but the optic system isn't quality, but because the optic system, the optic design, the mounting footprint, if you will, has never been reliable to me. Because Glock makes their plates out of cast metal and they're very, very thick, it allows very few threads of the screws to go into the slide. And if that plate has any kind of flex or bend in it, which a lot of them do, they kind of come with just kind of like a little general curve to them, not intentionally, I'm sure, just a byproduct of the manufacturing process. Anytime you shoot, that little flex creates tension on the screw heads and eventually can break one or both of them. So I've never been a fan of the MOS, mainly because of the plates. Because this plate's made of steel, going into the 2,000 round review process, was that going to be something I would also experience, not only with their mounting plate, but do I have issues with losing zero on the 509 optic? You'll notice looking at the specifications for the 509 optic that it shares a lot of specifics with the 508T, performance-wise, as far as battery life and reticle and things like that, and that's because there's a lot of commonality between the two optics when it comes to the electronics, which is something I really like. It does have night vision settings. It's got multiple brightness settings, something we want. The buttons are here on the left side of the optic window, and they are slightly recessed, rubberized, got that waterproofing, water resistance in there. It is a dual power optional. You can run off battery or you can run off the solar panel. If you do run off battery only, which is kind of the way I prefer to run, because it allows me to control the brightness of the dot for varied lighting conditions much more assuredly, changing the battery is as easy as opening this, taking a little flathead right here, pulling this battery tray out, throwing a new battery in there. Now they couldn't go with a 2032 as their battery choice and still maintain this smaller footprint. That being said, it still maintains a very strong battery life, especially if you run it dual power, where it'll draw from the solar power when the big orange ball is available and draw from battery power when it's not. Just like the 508, the 507, that 2 MOA dot with our circle reticle. I do like that reticle a lot, and you can turn off You can take the 2 MOA dot and just have the circle. You can turn the circle off and just have the dot. You've got options when it comes to what reticle you want to project into this enclosed emitter. But of course, the question everybody's going to be asking is the enclosed emitter of the 509 a significant advantage? Does it provide what we want from an enclosed emitter? Well, I can tell you just my initial testing before I even zeroed it. I had already mounted it on the gun at the house. I made repeated attempts to get this thing fog up to a degree to where it wasn't usable. And the only way I was able to do that was to leave it in the freezer for about 3 hours, then take it out of the freezer and immediately put it into 90-degree heat from a heat gun to get that fogging on the lens. I was able to fog up both lenses. Not that big of a deal. In the enclosed emitter system still allowed me to have a vague, I wouldn't even say vague, a assured purchase on a slightly blurry optical projection, which then I combined with the image from my unblocked eye through occluded shooting and was able to get a sight picture and knowledgeably know what I was looking at. I wasn't able to reproduce those conditions on the range because I couldn't bring a freezer out here. And just based on Georgia in the wintertime, not a lot of humidity, even running the AC or the heater in the truck wasn't able to really fog that glass up. Enclosed emitters have less fogging problems than non-enclosed emitters. So as far as the boogeyman of it's going to get water on it or it's going to fog up through condensation, there are preventative steps you can take to prevent that, such as anti-fogging or Rain-X coating. But if you're carrying it concealed, probably not going to be an issue anyway because it's held against the body heat. And if you're carrying it in a duty holster, because of the nature of the emitter system, even if both lenses do fog, that emitter inside is still projecting that nice clean image. I don't think you're going to run into a situation where you would not have a usable point of aim. At least I wasn't able to create one as hard as I tried. My first look for durability on almost anything firearm related, optics specific, definitely optics I should say, is a 500 round burn down. Something I do with firearms, something to do with a lot of accessories I review. I'm going to put 500 rounds through the gun as quickly as possible to see if that accelerated rate of fire creates any issues with the optic whatsoever. Now throughout the review process, and specifically in the burn down, I shot 115, 124, 124 plus P. So we've got range and duty carry specific ammo gold dot, that 124 plus P, to see if that recoil curve or just the overall accelerated use for 500 rounds was going to create any issues with the 509. So here's your burn down. First to last round, no issues whatsoever. One thing I definitely noticed is the reticle remained bright from first to last round. I've had some holographic optics in the past that when the gun underneath them got hot, the optic would start to dim or almost start to kind of speckle around the edges and bleed through, if you will. That's kind of a poor use of the English language, but it's the best way I can kind of describe it to you. Didn't experience that at all. Granted, this is a handgun. If I'd mounted it on a machine gun right over the receiver, I might have gotten different results, but I have no way of knowing that because it's a handgun specific type optic. But that 500 rounds, 115, 124, 124 plus P, as far as the burn down goes, the optic was a pass. As far as durability beyond that goes, doing a 2,000 round review process, I'm going to use the optic in my normal practice and some specifics that I'm going to do for testing. One of those things is one-handed manipulations. I'm going to do a lot of one-handed manipulations using the optic to cycle the slide on the gun. This is something that we teach for self-defense shooting, how to operate a firearm, cycle a firearm one-handed. And because an optic provides a much larger purchase area for doing that, it's something I'm going to test, and it's something that you see more in law enforcement, but you see it in a lot of self-defense classes. I know I teach it to my open enrollment students. If you absolutely have to cycle the gun one-handed, you can use a rear sight on an iron sight gun, but an optic gun, you might as well use the face of the optic. In fact, that'd be the only time I'd really advocate using the optic body to manipulate the slide, is when you don't have another hand available to do it. So I was able to do a lot of repetitions throughout the remaining 1,500 rounds of the review, just mixing dummy rounds in with my normal ammunition. And every time I'd hit a failure to fire, I'd go ahead, tap, cycle with the slide. Didn't create any issues. The lens is recessed enough that even off of more I should say, less smooth or less flat surfaces, I wasn't having a secondary impact on that internal lens from what I'm working off of. So as far as design goes, with that slight angle on the lens and how it's recessed inside the lip of the optic body itself, it definitely lends itself well to this type of manipulation. I didn't feel like I was ever in any real danger of breaking that lens by manipulating the optic off of other objects. What most people are waiting for, and one of the most controversial things I do in all the optics that I test, and I test almost all of them, is the drop test. I'm going to drop the optic once every 500 rounds to see if that shock, that force delivered to the optic body breaks it or damages it but still allows it to be usable. Because I really want every optic to survive the drop test, and if an optic does crack, I want to know if it's still going to be usable if it takes that damage. Now, my caveat that I say pretty much every video at this point that I film when I do an optic test is, this isn't to simulate because I think people are going to drop their guns a lot. Yeah, that's a possibility because gravity exists and so does this height. I use shoulder height because I'm going to stay roughly the same height for, you know, at least another 30 years. And because I'm trying to simulate a lot of force being delivered to the gun while still maintaining a certain degree of realism. Optics can, and I have seen evidence of optics being broken just by being in a holster and having the user roll on them when on a hard surface like asphalt or concrete. If it can handle a drop, it's going to handle that. So every 500 rounds, I do a drop test. Here's your drop tests. On the very first drop test, I did crack the rear lens in the top left corner. I cracked it. I didn't break the lens out of there. I didn't have a hole open up into the internal section between the rear and the forward lens, the optical and the objective lens, if you will. That was the only time I was actually able to damage either lens, and this is just the rear lens during the drop test. So after 4 drop tests, I've got a crack in that rear left corner up there. It did give me a little bit of hesitancy moving forward. I was like, okay, it cracked it once, is that going to happen again? But I wasn't able to reproduce or increase any damage to that particular area during the other 3 drop tests for the 2,000 rounds I put through it. One thing I did after the crack is I got home, threw the gun in the freezer. I wanted to see if any moisture would get in there and start condensating. Wasn't able to create that situation. If this did happen, you could send it in and Holosun would probably honor and replace it, especially based on the fact that they have a really good warranty, if that was a concern of yours. But I'm going to keep running it just like it is. I'm at 2,000 rounds now. I will do an update video if and when I make it to 10,000 and if and when I make it to 20,000, just continuing on with this. But just on durability, the one-hand manipulations and the drop testing, the 509 is a huge pass. The last question about drops is, did it maintain accuracy? Well, here's a 5-round group fired on 124 grain gold dot at 25 yards. This is the 5-round group I fired. I filmed this right after I initially zeroed the optic before I got into the review process. After the final drop test, I fired another 5-round group on the same ammunition at 25 yards. So here is a 5-round group fired after the very last of 4 drops for the 2,000 round review. So I think we can put to bed the worry over it not maintaining 0. After 4 drops, I can't tell the difference between those 2 shot groups at 25 yards fired on the same type target, same type of ammunition from the same gun. So after 2,000 round reviews, including 4 shoulder height drop tests, the 509 has maintained 0. At the time of filming this video, there are 2 enclosed emitter optics that were specifically designed for handguns. That is the Aimpoint Acro and the Holosun 509. And I don't do comparison reviews. I believe products should stand on their merits alone. If you want to compare them, look at 2 different reviews from 2 different trusted sources. I feel that bias and subjectivity gets into comparisons, but I know people are going to ask if they, and this is, I hate this hypothetical question more than any other hypothetical question on the face of the earth, is if you could only have one. Well, I can't only have one. I can have as many as I can afford. So I think that's kind of a, I mean, I get where people are trying to go with that question, like which one would you absolutely prefer over any other? If I had to choose between the 2, and the only reason I'm putting this in the review is because I know I'm going to get so many people asking, and I'm going to get tired of answering on such a redundant scale. It's almost going to be like recursion, that I felt like I'd just go ahead and put it in the video to kind of avoid that. But don't get used to this special treatment, because I don't do comparison reviews. If I had to choose between the Acro and the Holosun 509, I would take the Holosun 509. Now, I'm not going to explain my answer by comparing the two. I'm going to explain my answer by reiterating the features of the 509. I've got a simplified mounting system with a side battery access that's going to give me increased battery life over the competition. Not only do I have increased battery life if I plan on replacing those batteries, but I also have a secondary battery source being, well, the sun. I also have intuitive, easy, and large adjustments that can be made on an enclosed emitter system that provides a high refresh rate when transferring from target to target. I don't have any blooming or parallaxing light issues I get from being in varied lighting conditions. It works well in low light, it works great under night vision, and it works well on just bright sunny days. That reticle is intuitive in the fact that I can go from a 2M away to a 2M away with a circle, or I can just use a circle for more of a broad or vague or maybe even shotgun specific type of speed reticle ghost ring sight, if you will. I've got all those features in something that doesn't cost a whole lot of money, and I'm sure a lot of aftermarket plates for aftermarket systems will be available very, very soon, or guns milled specifically for it, because the mounting interface, the mounting platform is very simplified. But if you already have an MOS, you got a steel plate, you're good to go, you're ready to go to work. I did have some reservations going into the review, like I said at the beginning, of the MOS not holding up to the task. With the steel plate, those fears were largely unfounded at the 2,000 round mark. Now, I did say I would prefer, as far as enclosed emitter optics go, I would prefer this one over the Acro. And the biggest reasoning for that, and again, I don't want to really get into a comparison rabbit hole, is this optic gives me things that the Acro doesn't. Quite a few things, actually. That doesn't necessarily mean it's better, doesn't necessarily mean that the Acro is worse. It means just based on my, at this point, expansive experience with testing all the various red dot sights that are out there, this one checks more boxes. Does that mean I'm going to put 509s on all my guns? Well, I can't, because most of them are milled for an RMR footprint. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to put it on a lot of future guns. If I had to grab an optic, or if I was budget conscious, but I wanted something that was going to be durable for duty or for self-defense carry, and I really absolutely had to have an enclosed emitter, this would definitely be the optic I would go with. I'm Aaron with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.